What is a man, if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed, a beast no more? Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to fust in us unused.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation from the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore. This video is the abridgment of a much longer work. The full text is available on the From the Quarries website. I'll put a link to it in the description below. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Introduction to the Hermetic Art. Brethren, many of us have heard Freemasonry described as the Hermetic Art, yet few pause to question the origin or implications of this title. I am persuaded that the teachings enshrined in our craft are not modern inventions, but echoes of a perennial doctrine, coexistent with man himself, concerning our divine origin, our descent into matter, and the means of return to that primordial source. As humanity's awareness of the one life became increasingly veiled, the truths of our origin and destiny were preserved through allegory and symbol. Thus arose those peculiar systems of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, substituted secrets which safeguard spiritual knowledge until man is once again able to apprehend higher truths through inner awakening. Though these veils vary by culture and age, their essence remains unchanged, for truth, though concealed, cannot be destroyed. This symbolic tradition found its most enduring material in stone, the least mutable of man's surroundings. Early monuments, from solitary menhirs to dolmens and tumuli, served as hieroglyphs encoding esoteric principles. As architecture evolved, so too did its capacity to express eternal truths. The Temple of Solomon, in its successive enclosures, symbolized the soul's ascent through purification toward reunion with the divine. Freemasonry inherits this symbolic architecture, not as empty ritual, but as a manuscript in stone. It records not merely outward customs, but humanity's inner striving across ages. Through its allegories and symbols, Masonry preserves the Hermetic legacy, that man is a divine being undergoing transformation, and that the path of return is hidden in plain sight, awaiting those with eyes to see. Stone symbolism and sacred architecture. In seeking permanence amidst the flux of mortal life, early humanity turned to stone, the one material that seemed immune to change, as the medium through which to preserve a sacred tradition. These stones, whether single menhirs or complex dolmens, became silent hieroglyphs, encoding fragments of the great truth of man's divine origin and destiny. Each monument, like a letter or word in a cosmic sentence, conveyed a phase of the esoteric doctrine. Over time, this evolved into the art and science of architecture, what Cleland aptly terms the manuscript of humanity written in stone. Architecture, in this sense, is far more than physical construction. It is the living record of religious aspiration, social structure, and metaphysical belief. From the primeval stone to the grandeur of the Gothic cathedral, every style reflects not just an aesthetic, but a stage in the spiritual evolution of man. The Temple of Solomon stands at the center of Masonic allegory precisely because it embodies this symbolism in its very structure. Concentric courts and chambers progressively narrowing the path toward the Sanctum Sanctorum, the place of divine encounter. Throughout history, humanity has cycled through periods of inspired growth and rigid fixity, each architectural form mirroring these phases. Stagnation leads to symbolic death, but out of each ruin rises a new expression of the eternal pattern. This cyclic ascent, the winding staircase of initiation, spirals ever inward toward the center, where the word may once again be recovered. In this light, Freemasonry becomes not merely a revival of ancient building guilds, but the conscious continuation of a sacred architectural language, a symbolic expression of man's spiritual architecture and his destined apotheosis. Cyclic history and spiritual evolution. The spiritual history of humanity unfolds not as a straight line, but in great spirals, periods of growth, consolidation, stagnation, and rebirth. Just as architecture records man's outward culture, so too it reflects his inner state. When ideas crystallize into dogma and institutions cling to fixity, the result is spiritual decline. But death is not an end. It is the prelude to resurrection. Always the light re-emerges, richer, more diverse, and better attuned to the evolving soul of man. This principle is vividly reflected in the star symbolism of successive root races. The six-pointed star of Atlantis persists in the Jewish shield of David and Islamic geometry, while the Aryan race favored the five-pointed pentalpha, symbol of man perfected. Now, as a new epoch dawns, a four-pointed star, emblem of the Festival of Britain, emerges as a possible harbinger of the sixth root race and a new spiritual dispensation. Even the orientation of sacred architecture mirrors this cyclic transformation. Ancient temples once faced west, pleading for the sun's return. Later, worship turned southward to honor the sun at its height, and finally eastward toward illumination. In Coventry's new cathedral, a revolutionary design places the altar in the north, the place long called darkness in Masonic symbolism, so that light now floods from every direction to that central point of mystery and reverence. Freemasonry reflects this same initiatory arc. The candidate enters from the west, is illumined in the south, is exalted in the east, and may one day be raised to rule from the north, the symbolic place of the future, of that which is to come. This is the spiral path, the path of unfoldment, where darkness and light are reconciled, where opposites converge, and where the adept learns that death itself is but a doorway to transmutation. Hermes Trismegistus and the Seven Rays. At the heart of the Hermetic tradition stands Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, mythic progenitor of esoteric wisdom, identified variously with Thoth of Egypt, Mercury of Rome, and Taut of Phoenicia. As a messenger of the gods and scribe of divine law, Hermes embodies the transmission of sacred knowledge from the divine to the human. Under his name, a corpus of writings influenced Christian fathers, such as Augustine, and underpinned much of later mystical thought. Albert Pike tells us that Hermes selected a priesthood to safeguard sacred sciences, astronomy, music, metallurgy, and mysteries linked to planetary deities and the seven rays. This initiated caste preserved not only technical knowledge, but metaphysical truths veiled in secrecy. Hence the term Hermetic became synonymous with hidden or sealed, reflected both in the Hermetic seal of the alchemists and in the sub rosa confidentiality of confession. The myth of Hermes is deeply allegorical. He steals from the gods, not as a thief, but as a symbolic figure who appropriates the divine attributes to awaken them in man. His caduceus, entwined by twin serpents, signifies mastery over Kundalini, the latent spiritual force. In his various guises, he becomes patron of orators, healers, guides of souls, and artisans, each aspect representing stages of inner mastery. The name Hermes, as Cleland observes, shares its roots with Hermes, Horus Moses, linking him to the initiatory figures of multiple traditions. In Egypt, he was self-created and acted as divine measurer, penman, and arbiter of cosmic balance, attributes also borne by Hiram Abiff, the Masonic exemplar. The ibis-headed Thoth, with lunar crown and stylus, inscribes the deeds of souls in the Hall of Judgment. He stands beside the scales, recording the soul's worth against the feather of Ma'at, echoing the weighing of the heart and the esoteric weighing of the Mason's own conduct. Thus, Hermes is both divine archetype and human ideal, the perfected initiate, the teacher of hidden truth, and the prototype of the Master Mason. Alchemy and the transmutation of the self. The core aim of alchemy, rightly understood, is not the transmutation of base metals into gold, but of the base self into the spiritual man. As the Hermetic maxim affirms, as above, so below. So the alchemist seeks to mirror divine transformation in the microcosm of the soul. Cleland emphasizes that this inner alchemy, the true magnum opus, is the work of regeneration, rebirth, and conscious reunification with the divine. Throughout the Hermetic tradition, the philosopher's stone symbolizes this transmutation. It is not a physical object, but a perfected state of being. In some Masonic rites, candidates are obligated on a black cubic stone, echoing the Kaaba of Islam and resonating with the biblical promise of a white stone given to those who overcome. The stone changes color, like the soul, passing from darkness to illumination through inner purification. Alchemy's triune agents, salt, sulfur, and mercury, correspond to body, soul, and spirit, and are echoed in Masonry's sun, moon, and master of the lodge. Man, as microcosm, must harmonize these elements within himself. The Hermetic and Masonic paths both assert that human nature is capable of being elevated to divinity, not metaphorically, but literally through discipline, knowledge, and inward transformation. Cleland draws upon figures such as W.L. Wilmshurst, who insisted that true rebirth is not symbolic but empirical and must be undertaken in secrecy by those who are properly prepared. The great work is dangerous, for it opens the deepest recesses of the psyche and exposes the aspirant to forces of enormous potency. This is why the path is veiled in allegory and reserved for the few who are willing to renounce worldly illusions. Freemasonry, when understood as the Hermetic Art, is thus a school of transmutation. It offers not only moral instruction, but a sacred technology for the reconstruction of the inner man, a science of illumination, guarded by symbols and transmitted through ritual, awaiting those who would walk the path from stone to star. Examples from history. To affirm the Hermetic Art's credibility, Cleland presents a lineage of historical figures whose lives and testimonies testify to both the material and spiritual success of the great work. Among them is Nicolas Flamel, the Parisian scrivener, whose own account describes discovering a mysterious alchemical book and, through long trial and divine grace, attaining the philosopher's stone. With his wife Penel, he used the fruits of his transmutation not for personal gain, but for philanthropy, founding hospitals and churches across France. Other luminaries include Raymond Lully, who, in the court of Edward II, reputedly transmuted base metals into gold in exchange for royal promises to fund a new crusade, promises broken, leading to his imprisonment. The gold he produced was minted into coins known as nobles of the rose, said to surpass all natural purity. Similarly, John Cremer, Abbot of Westminster, pursued alchemy for decades before gaining success under Lully's tutelage. Further examples span ages and empires. Roger Bacon, veiling his wisdom to avoid persecution. Geber in Arabia, whose dense treatises gave rise to the term gibberish. Albertus Magnus, Paracelsus, and Cornelius Agrippa, each merging Christian mysticism with Hermetic science. Even Elias Ashmole, Masonic scholar and namesake of the Ashmolean Museum, affirmed the art's legitimacy while withholding its secrets. Perhaps most provocatively, Cleland speculates that Sir Isaac Newton, during his long silence following his early scientific triumphs, was immersed in alchemical study and possibly succeeded. As warden and then master of the Royal Mint, Newton's influence coincided with a sudden stabilisation of British currency. Cleland suggests that such figures, though absent from the founding roster, may have been the hidden architects behind the revival of speculative Freemasonry in 1717. These examples are not mere curiosities, but indicators that the Hermetic Art, far from fantasy, was long pursued by the most brilliant and spiritually awakened minds of Western civilization. Their testimonies affirm that behind the veils of symbolism lies a living science, at once material and mystical, available to those prepared to undertake the great work. Alchemy as transmutation of the self. The true purpose of the Hermetic Art is not the transformation of base metals into gold, but the transmutation of the base elements of human nature into the pure essence of the spiritual man. This is the great work, the magnum opus, the refinement of the self until it becomes worthy to bear the divine image. While the language of the alchemists may speak of furnaces, crucibles, and elixirs, these are emblems only. The fire they tend is the fire of the will, the vessel, the soul of man, the dross to be purged, the appetites and illusions of material existence. The Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, governs this mystery. As creation proceeds from the divine realm into the lower worlds, so must regeneration proceed in the reverse direction. The aspirant must ascend from darkness to light, from ignorance to wisdom, from multiplicity to unity. The great work is the reversal of the fall into matter, a deliberate and conscious act of reintegration. It is not an act of belief, but of becoming. There are two paths toward mastery of this mystery, one spiritual, the other material. The first, the approach from above, begins with the inner transformation of the self. It demands discipline, devotion, and illumination. Its tools are silence, contemplation, and sacrifice. The second, the approach from below, is the modern scientific path, the external study of matter, the unlocking of energy, the manipulation of form. Both paths, if rightly pursued, may arrive at the threshold of the same truth. But the one risks error when undertaken without reverence, the other peril when practiced without wisdom. This is why the ancient alchemists wrote in riddles and concealed their doctrines beneath allegory. The great work is perilous. It awakens forces within the soul and the world that, if ungoverned, may destroy rather than redeem. The transmutation of man is not a metaphor, but a reality, and it demands of the aspirant a full commitment, a sacrifice of all that is false, fleeting, and impure. Only he who is properly prepared, morally, mentally, spiritually, may pass through the fire and emerge refined. The ceremonies of Freemasonry, rightly understood, are this very process. The candidate, entering in darkness, is as the prima materia, unworked and unknown. He is subjected to trial, instructed in the hidden laws, and elevated by degrees, until he is made a master. A builder not of walls, but of his own inner temple. The lost word for which he seeks is the very essence of the self he is yet to become. The perfect ashlar is the soul, squared and polished, made fit to take its place in the heavenly edifice. The transmutation spoken of in the Hermetic tradition is no ancient superstition. It is the transformation of the soul through the steady application of inner work. It is rebirth, not figurative, but actual. It is the great work of man, undertaken not for pride, nor power, nor reward, but for the recovery of his true nature, and the return to that divine unity from which he first descended. Matter and energy, a Hermetic worldview. The Hermetic doctrine has long maintained that all of nature is a play of opposites, spirit and matter, form and force, above and below, each reflecting the other in a state of dynamic polarity. This ancient insight finds startling confirmation in the discoveries of modern science. It is now understood that matter and energy are not distinct substances, but different modes of the same underlying reality, each convertible into the other, each a reflection of hidden laws governing the structure of the cosmos. What was once declared by Hermes Trismegistus in the aphorisms of the Emerald Tablet, that which is below is as that which is above, for the performance of the miracles of the one thing, has become the working hypothesis of the physicist and the cosmologist. Every act of transformation in the natural world is an alchemical process. The plant, drawing light and heat from the sun, transmutes that energy into living form. Through photosynthesis, it transforms what is invisible, light, into matter, sugars, cellulose, and lignin. In turn, the destruction of the plant through fire returns those forms to their elemental state, releasing light and heat once more. In both directions, generation and dissolution, the laws of alchemy are at work. All energy, whether manifest as motion, magnetism, combustion, or light, is but a change in state, an interplay between the seen and unseen, between form and the formless. The Hermetic tradition teaches that the same principles which govern physical change govern spiritual transformation. As matter is refined through fire, so is the soul refined through suffering and discipline. As energy may be extracted from within the atom, so too the divine spark may be awakened within man. The initiatic sciences teach that each atom is a mirror of the cosmos, a system of balance, of harmony, of motion around a hidden center. Modern atomic theory, with its nucleus and its orbiting electrons, reflects this very image: the sun and its planets, the grand architect and his creation, the master and his lodge. To the initiate, such correspondences are not poetry, but fact. The lodge is structured in harmony with these laws. The cardinal directions reflect solar movement, the offices, celestial powers, the working tools, the instruments of transformation. Just as energy may be stored, transferred, or liberated, so too the moral and spiritual energies of man may be accumulated and applied, through will, through virtue, through ritual, toward his own regeneration. Thus, what modern science approaches through the analysis of particles and fields, Hermeticism presents through symbol, ritual, and myth. Both speak to the same reality, but from opposite poles. The one dissects, the other synthesizes. The one seeks to understand the mechanism, the other to enter into the mystery. Cleland's synthesis lies in the recognition that these are not rival paths, but complementary modes of perception. The truth is one. Its appearances are many. In Freemasonry, these truths are not merely studied, they are enacted. The temple is not just a chamber, but a cosmos. The candidate is not merely a man, but a living microcosm of universal principles. Every movement within the lodge, every word spoken, every symbol displayed, reaffirms the law that governs both atom and archangel. That what is manifest must arise from that which is unmanifest, and that the redemption of matter begins with the awakening of spirit. Freemasonry as repository of Hermetic symbols. The allegories and symbols of Freemasonry are not arbitrary inventions, nor are they the relics of a bygone trade. They are, in truth, the deliberate preservations of a far older science, the Hermetic science of spiritual regeneration. Each officer, each object, each utterance within the lodge is a veiled expression of metaphysical law. Freemasonry, in this sense, is not only an ethical fraternity, nor simply a ritual drama, but a structured map of the soul's ascent, a repository of the symbolic language by which the great work is taught and enacted. The lodge is itself a microcosm, modelled upon the temple of the world. Its form, proportions, and orientation correspond not to the caprice of design, but to ancient principles of cosmology. East and west signify origin and goal. North, the hidden realm of potential. South, the noonday sun of conscious action. Within this sacred space, the initiate proceeds along a path which symbolizes not only moral instruction, but initiatory transformation. Each degree is a stage of internal alchemy. The entered apprentice is the prima materia, crude and unrefined, the fellow craft, the agent in the work of separation and purification, the master mason, the culmination of the process, the stone made perfect, the soul made conscious of its divine nature. The triad that governs Masonic teaching, the sun, the moon, and the master of the lodge, reflects the Hermetic trinity of sulfur, salt, and mercury, spirit, body, and soul. These are not mere correspondences, but vital truths. The sun illuminates, the moon reflects. The master, seated in the east, is the human representative of divine reason, directing the work and presiding over the temple of self-transformation. The jewels, the tracing board, the working tools, all serve to awaken in the mind of the initiate a recollection of truths long buried beneath the surface of conscious life. The journey of the candidate is emblematic of the alchemical ascent. he enters in darkness, bound and unknowing, and is progressively brought to light. The symbolic death he undergoes is the dissolution of the profane self, the raising, a reconstitution in spiritual form. The lost word he seeks is the secret of his own being, lost through the descent into matter, obscured by the illusions of the world, but recoverable through effort, discipline, and grace. Freemasonry, like the Hermetic Art, teaches that this word is not given, but found, not uttered, but revealed inwardly when the conditions are made right. In the lodge, even the movements have meaning. The perambulations trace the circuit of the sun, mirroring the celestial journey. The knocks upon the door echo the rhythm of inner awakening. The position of the pillars recalls the balance of forces that sustain the world. This is not theatre, but initiation. It is not the outer form that matters, but the inner transformation it conceals and invites. To those with ears to hear and eyes to see, the craft speaks a language older than words, as exact as geometry and as elevating as prayer. To preserve this symbolism is not mere antiquarianism. It is to guard the keys of a science that leads, not to knowledge alone, but to wisdom. In the age of mechanized thought and spiritual amnesia, Freemasonry endures as a vessel of perennial truth. Its ritual is a silent scripture. Its symbols are letters of a sacred alphabet. Its work is the same as that undertaken in the chambers of the old adepts, under the vaulted heavens and before the face of the one thing. The stone as symbol of perfection. Among all the symbols preserved within the craft, none is more central nor more richly layered than the stone. It is at once the foundation and the summit, the alpha and omega of the Masonic and Hermetic traditions. In its various forms, the rough ashlar, the perfect ashlar, the cubic stone, the philosopher's stone, it embodies the entire arc of human transformation, from what is given to what must be made. The rough ashlar is man, as he is born into the world, unhewn, unshaped, governed by impulse and ignorance. It is the prima materia of the alchemist, the undifferentiated substance which contains all potential, yet lacks all form. It is not evil, but incomplete. It bears within itself the divine spark, but buried beneath accretions of matter and illusion. The work of the initiate, whether mason or alchemist, is to shape, refine, and elevate this substance until it reflects the image of perfection, the perfect ashlar, which can be set seamlessly into the divine edifice. In the Hermetic tradition, this same process is described through the symbolism of the philosopher's stone. To the vulgar, it is imagined as a magical substance capable of transmuting metals into gold. But to the wise, it is understood as the perfected human soul, stable, incorruptible, luminous. It is man rendered into his true nature, not by fleeing the material world, but by redeeming it from within. Just as gold is the most incorruptible of metals, the symbol of the sun on earth, so the perfected soul becomes the radiant center of the microcosm, a living mirror of divine order. This alchemical symbolism resonates powerfully with other traditions. The black stone of the Kaaba, originally white, darkened by the sins of man, speaks to the same mystery of fall and restoration. The white stone promised in the Apocalypse to him that overcometh, in which is written a new name, denotes a state of inner transfiguration. It is not a reward granted after death, but a condition achieved through conscious struggle. The overcoming of separation, the reunification of the soul with its source. Freemasonry, in turn, preserves these mysteries in architectural form. The stone is not only the material of the temple, it is the emblem of the builder. The lodge teaches not only the use of tools, but the purpose of labour. Every strike of the chisel, every stroke of the gauge, is a blow against ignorance, a mark of progress upon the self. The candidate, passing through the degrees, is shown that he is the workman, the tool, and the stone itself. The temple he raises is not of limestone or granite, but of virtues, thoughts, and intentions, each cut and placed with deliberation in alignment with the grand design. Even the cubic stone bears esoteric geometry. The cube is the symbol of stability, of measure, of equilibrium in 3 dimensions. It represents the integration of opposites, above and below, front and back, left and right, brought into balance. In some traditions, it is unfolded into a cross, then reassembled into a cube, signifying death and resurrection. In Freemasonry, the cubic stone thus signifies not only moral uprightness, but metaphysical completion. The man who is both grounded and elevated, rooted and illumined, perfect in proportion because aligned with the divine archetype. To perfect the stone is to complete the great work. It is not a task for a moment, but a labour of years, perhaps of lifetimes. Yet the symbolism is not abstract. It is deeply practical. Each time the mason conquers a passion, tempers a thought, acts in charity or truth, he shapes his stone. The perfection of the whole temple depends on the perfection of each individual block. Thus, the work of the mason is both solitary and universal, to make himself fit, and thereby to take his rightful place in the order of the world. Unity in diversity, the goal of the great work. The final aim of the great work, whether framed in Hermetic, alchemical, or Masonic terms, is not only the perfection of the individual, but the harmonization of the many into the one. This is the consummation of all esoteric traditions, the reintegration of the scattered fragments of being into a unified, conscious whole. Cleland presents this not as a philosophical abstraction, but as the very purpose of human existence. It is the goal of the Hermetic Art, the culmination of the alchemical process, and the end toward which all Masonic labour is directed. Unity is not to be confused with uniformity. The divine plan, as reflected in both nature and initiation, delights in multiplicity. Stars differ in glory. Each soul shines with its own hue. But beneath this diversity lies a hidden order, a single essence expressed through manifold forms. The true work is to uncover this hidden unity, to pierce through the veils of division, creed, and identity, and to perceive, with unveiled vision, the common flame that burns within all men. In this, Freemasonry differs from dogma. It does not dictate what a man must believe. It asks only that he believe in the possibility of truth, and that he seek it with integrity, reverence, and love. Freemasonry, therefore, is not a religion, but it is profoundly religious. It offers no creed, yet its rites are suffused with spiritual gravity. It draws from many traditions, not to dilute them, but to interpret them in light of an underlying esoteric science. The Mason is not called to abandon his faith, but to live it more deeply. In the lodge, he sees that the tools of the builder are also the tools of the soul, that the erection of the temple without mirrors the raising of the temple within. There is no contradiction between symbols drawn from Solomon, Hermes, and Christ, for all true paths lead to the same summit, where names are transcended and the One is known in silence. This understanding offers not only individual salvation, but social transformation. The temple is not built for the benefit of one stone alone. Each must be squared, each placed with care, so that the whole structure may rise in strength and harmony. The great work is thus also a communal labour. As each mason perfects himself, he contributes to the perfection of the whole. As he brings his passions into harmony, he becomes an instrument of concord in the wider world. The lodge becomes a model of the reconciled cosmos, a space where men of differing backgrounds, beliefs, and temperaments labour together in peace, under the guidance of light. It is this principle, the unity that emerges through diversity, the order that arises from conscious cooperation, that offers hope for the world. In an age of fragmentation and discord, Freemasonry stands as a quiet testament to the possibility of harmony, not by erasing difference, but by consecrating it, not by enforcing doctrine, but by embodying wisdom. When each man realizes that the true enemy is not his brother, but his own unrefined self, when each seeks not power, but purification, then, and only then, will the spiritual temple of humanity rise from its foundations, and the kingdom of heaven be established, not beyond the grave, but in the midst of the world. This is the final transmutation, the alchemy of the world itself. The perfection of man leads to the perfection of society, the raising of the individual stone to the raising of the whole structure. It is not a utopia to be imposed, but a sacred order to be revealed, one soul, one act, one lodge at a time. Here lies the culmination of the Hermetic Art and the eternal promise of the craft. For a deep dive into the history, philosophy, and traditions of Freemasonry, subscribe to From the Quarries. You will find hundreds of lectures, presentations, shorts, and other Masonic works written by Freemasons for Freemasons. Visit FromTheQuarries.com or YouTube at From the Quarries.